So once again, my name is Father Michael Grzesik. I'm the associate pastor of at St. James, and it's a blessing to be here with all of you. I've been itching to come over here to celebrate Mass for you. Mainly because this parish is dedicated and consecrated to Our Lady's Immaculate Heart. Our Lady, Jesus' own mom. Now, when I was reading the gospel and I was thinking about all the things that Jesus wants us to be blessed by, I noticed the second part, woe to you, all the different admonitions that Jesus gives to all of us. I think that all of us here today know someone in our family who's fallen away from the faith, fallen away from Jesus, and they should be here with us now. And for whatever reason that they don't feel the love of God, they don't trust in Him, they're looking into the world. They're looking for the world to fill something that's empty within their own hearts. And they'll never be satisfied. Because our hearts were created by God. Our hearts were created to love, to give love, to receive love, but ultimately to love God. And that space that's created in our hearts to love God alone will never, ever be satisfied by the things of this world. It's impossible. And that's why I think so many people, they get caught up in drug addiction and alcoholism and seeking all types of worldly fame and power and money. And none of that will ever satisfy them. How do I know this? Because I lived it. I was raised Catholic in a little town called Flint, Michigan, if you've ever heard of it. My mom and dad were Catholic. My mom and dad made a rule that every Sunday that our family would go to church together. And I remember trying to negotiate with my dad. I'm like, hey, Dad, could we maybe go to church maybe every other weekend or maybe once a month, like our neighbors across the street? My dad sat me down and he said, son, as long as you live in my house and you sleep on the bed that I bought you and you're eating the food that I put on the table, you're going to church on Sunday. So it was a dictatorship. I didn't get a choice in the matter. But we went to church every Sunday together as a family. But once I got away to college, it was over. I was like, that was not my faith. That was my parents' faith. They imposed it on me. I'm done with that. And so as I continued my college years looking for worldly things, nothing seemed to satisfy me. And I decided to drop out of college. I told my mom and dad, I need to find myself. I need to travel around the world and discover what it is that I really want to do with my life. And my mom and dad said, if you drop out of college, we're cutting you off. I said, I understand that. Not a problem. So I left Flint, Michigan. I came to Chicago. I have many relatives out here. And then I moved to California. And in some way, somehow, I ended up in Hawaii. I was living out in Hawaii, working multiple jobs because it was so expensive out there. And actually, when I hit some hard times, I was actually living in a tent because I had nowhere to live. And that whole time, my mom and dad, they would always track me down, trying to find out what city I was living in next, where was I working at, what was going on with my life. And my mom would always say, Mike, are you going to church? Mike, are you praying to God? Mike, we're sending up prayers for you. And I'm on the other end of the line saying, Mom, don't send me prayers, send me money. I'm living in a tent. But that whole time I was traveling around the country, there was something that I couldn't put my finger on, something that was longing in my heart. What was it that I was looking for? I realize now it was God. Through a bunch of different circumstances, I ended up coming back to my parents' house in Flint, Michigan. Felt like the prodigal son. And my mom and dad said, as long as you go back to school, we'll help you get on your feet and we'll get you going again. So I started to attend Michigan State University, and on my spring break, my mother gave me a book. And she put it on all the other books that I had to study for that spring break, and she said, you might be interested in reading this. And when I picked up the book said this. It said, on June 24th, 1981, 6 teenagers in a little village called Medjugorje said that they saw an apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And according to them, our Blessed Mother's been appearing to them every single night since. And I read that and I thought, oh my gosh, what is this all about? No one's ever told me about this. And then all of a sudden I remembered watching a movie about Our Lady of Fatima, Our Lady's apparitions that happened in 1917 to the 3 shepherd children. And I asked my mom, I said, Mom, is that kind of like what happened over in that place called Fatima? My mom said, yeah, except it's happening right now in our lifetime. So I devoured this book. I remember even skipping some of my classes just to finish this book. And when I finished the book, I had the greatest epiphany, and I said to myself, if this is true, if the Blessed Virgin Mary is really appearing in this little village called Medjugorje, what does that mean for me? It means everything that I was brought up to believe in as a Catholic is true. And that freaked me out, because I wasn't going to church, I wasn't living a Christian lifestyle, and I definitely didn't look like this. I had long hair all the way down my back. My ears were pierced. The holes never closed up, so my nieces always often ask me, Uncle Mike, were your ears pierced? I'm like, yeah, don't talk about it. But when I had this epiphany, I felt this desire to go back to church. And that's what I did. Some of the messages that our Blessed Mother has given in Medjugorje is calling us to conversion, calling us to go back to confession, calling us to the Mass. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, I've got nothing to confess. I haven't murdered anybody. I haven't stolen anything. But I knew I wasn't going to Mass. So from that point on, I went to Mass every single Sunday. Now, I went to one of the local religious gift stores, and I bought a little medal of Mary. It's called the Miraculous Medal. And I started to wear that. I didn't know that that was another Marian apparition spot that happened in Paris, France. And lo and behold, as time went on, I met a girl from Paris, France, that was here in Chicago. And we started to date. And we fell in love during the summer. She came to visit her friend and to be part of their wedding. And then as the summer was coming to a close, I thought, this is the last time I'm ever going to see her. But we continued to write. We continued to stay in touch by phone calls. This is before the age of the internet, by the way. And so we kept the relationship going. And she came back to see me over Christmas. She came back to see me again over Valentine's Day. And then she was going to come back to see me and meet my family over Easter. And I said, Virginie, you've already been here these last 2 times. Why don't you just wait there? As soon as I finish college, this last semester, I'll come out and meet your mom and dad. And then we'll travel all around Europe together. And she was going to be in my sister's wedding. So that's what we agreed to do. So when I traveled, or started to make the plans to travel to Paris, France, I started to think about Medjugorje. I thought, wow, it's just one more flight to go from Paris down to Croatia. The only problem was that the Bosnian Civil War was taking place. And if you remember some of our older parishioners, back in the early 90s, there was sniper fire. There was many people suffering during that Civil War. It wasn't a good time to make a pilgrimage to Sarajevo. But something in my heart was calling me to go to Medjugorje. So I made the decision I was going to do it. And then I was worried a little bit about what my mom and dad would think. When I told them, they're like, why would you go in the middle of the war? Why can't you wait till the war is finished? I said, something's telling me I have to go now. And then I gave my dad a piece of paper, and he goes, what's this, son? I said, well, just in case I don't come back. He looked at it. It was a life insurance policy, just in case. My dad looked at it, he said, son, this isn't even enough money to get your body back if something happens. So I flew off to Paris. I got to meet my girlfriend's mom and dad. Her mom loved me. Her dad hated me because I had the long hair and the earrings. And because of our relationship, there was a possibility of me bringing her back to the United States with me. But her father had a unique position. He was a philosophy instructor at the prestigious university called the Sorbonne. And he was an atheist. And he had infected his entire family, not his wife, but his 2 young daughters. Even though they were raised in the Catholic faith, they didn't go to church. And he was constantly trying to tell his family that God doesn't exist. I spent that time for those first couple of days there with them, and we were going to travel together after I came back from Medjugorje. And when I traveled down there, good old Croatian Airlines lost my luggage. I had no clothes, I had nothing, but I was going to Medjugorje, and I had such a desire to experience it for myself. And maybe I'd see the Blessed Virgin Mary. Just keep my fingers crossed. So after I got off the plane and I had no luggage, I saw that there was a Canadian group that was there, and I said, hey, can I hitch a ride with you to Medjugorje? I don't have my luggage, I have nothing. And they said, come on aboard. So as I got on the bus with them, when we traveled down to this place called Medjugorje, they started to pray a rosary. I was like, okay, I know what this is. I know the prayers of this. And then they prayed another rosary. And then they prayed another rosary. And then they prayed another rosary. And I thought, I got on the wrong bus. Well, we eventually made it into Medjugorje, and they said, come stay with us. If you've lost your tent, you've lost your clothes, just come stay with us. I was like, all right, I will. And so I stayed at their pension, but everybody was so beat up with the jet lag that they went to sleep. And I went down to St. James Church in Medjugorje. During the war, they would turn off all the lights because of the warplanes. They didn't want them coming and trying to bomb Medjugorje during the Civil War. So as I walked down there by myself, I was walking around the church grounds. And then this beautiful, beautiful shadow and silhouette of Mount Grzesik, which means Cross Mountain. And I was trying to get my bearings of where everything was at. And all of a sudden, this intense light came from the top of Mount Grzesik, where the cross is at. And this light began to emanate light throughout the valley. And it would pulsate and spin, and colors would shoot out from behind of it. And I'm like, that's the strangest strobe light. I've never seen anything like that before. And I watched it for a while, and I thought, just a weird strobe light, I guess. And then I went to bed. The next morning, I told the people in the pension what I had seen before that night. And they said, you saw the miracle of the cross. I was like, what are you talking about? What miracle? And they said, there's no electricity on top of that mountain. There's no lights on top of Cross Mountain at all. I was like, no, there's something up there. So I climbed all the way to the top of Mount Grzesik, and there was nothing there. There was no lights. There was no electricity. And I thought to myself, maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe I didn't see what I saw the night before. So that later that night, I went back down by the church to see if I'd see that light again. And all of a sudden, these two people came out of the vineyards there behind the church, and they came up to me, and they said, what are you doing behind St. James Church so late at night? I said, you're not going to believe this, but I saw this intense light coming from Mount Grzesik last night. And they looked at each other, and they looked at me, and they said, we saw that same light. And that's why we came out to see if we'd see it again. So we started to describe what it was that we saw the night before, and then all of a sudden, boom, the light came back on from the cross. And all three of us got goosebumps. And I remember the one woman from Canada, she started to cry. She said, God's showing us a miracle. And it moved my heart, because I realized that God had called the three of us, just like the three wise men, to Medjugorje, to experience what was happening there, Our Lady's apparitions from heaven, to tell us that God exists, to tell us to come back to church, to come back to confession, to pray the rosary, to receive her Son in the Holy Eucharist. Every day that we would go to Mass, it was almost like a fight. People were trying to get as close as they could to the front of the church. But everybody would sing on the top of their lungs. They loved being there together, and they wanted to receive Jesus in the Holy Eucharist. Now in Medjugorje, they have many confessionals. They only had 2 inside the church, and they had so many people who wanted to go to confession that they had to build 160 confessionals outside around the church. Think of that. We have, 2 confessionals here? 160. And that's still not enough. People are converting with what's happening in Medjugorje. Their hearts are being touched by our Blessed Mother. Your parish is dedicated to Our Lady's Immaculate Heart. And for all of you who have a child, a spouse, a grandchild who is lost, you need to bring them back to Mary, and through Mary, back to Jesus. That's what God wants from all of us. He wants us to have a devotion to our Blessed Mother because it's His own mom. And we can never love Mary more than Jesus does. So as time was going on, every time I would run into somebody, they would say, it's so great to see young people here in Medjugorje. And as they started up a conversation, they would always end the conversation with me by saying, have you ever thought about becoming a priest? I said, do I look like a priest with my long hair and earrings? Plus, I got a girlfriend back in Paris, so that's not on the docket here. And they would always say, pray about it. But it happened again and again and again. And I started to think maybe the Lord was trying to give me a sign. So I sat in front of St. James Courtyard, where they have a beautiful statue of Our Lady. And as I sat in front of the statue, in my heart, I said, Lord, are you really calling me to be a priest for you? I'm such a sinner. Can't you find anybody better? You're scraping the bottom of the barrel. Do you really want me to be a priest for you? And then all of a sudden, this Irish woman came out of the crowd. She walked across the plaza. She walked right up to me, and she said, glory be to God. Jesus wants me to give this to you. And I thought, as I opened up my hand, she was giving me money to get my hair cut. But as I looked inside my hand, it was a prayer card. And it was a beautiful picture of Jesus. His hands were folded intently. His eyes were closed. He was praying to the eternal Father. And above the prayer card, it said, come and follow me. Right when I was asking the Lord, do you want me to be a priest for you? He had to put the answer into my hands. There's so many miraculous stories that have happened in this little village of Medjugorje. And this past fall, the Vatican has issued a statement about the authenticity of the apparitions. They've given it what's called a nihil obstat, meaning let nothing obstruct devotion to our Blessed Mother. Now, the apparitions are still ongoing today. It's not like an apparition that happened 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago. It's happening today in our lifetime. So the Church, with its wisdom, is not giving it a full approval like Fatima or Lourdes, but you can go freely on pilgrimage to Medjugorje to experience the graces that God is giving each and every one of us to turn back to God, to embrace the graces now while we still have time. My brothers and sisters, we need to be keeping our eyes and our hearts focused on the Lord. And I know for myself, I found it difficult to even go to confession. But through Mary's gentleness and through her great love, she took me by the hand and said, you're going the wrong way. Let me lead you to my son Jesus. And my heart was filled with great love. Of course, I did go to confession in Medjugorje. And of course, this thought of becoming a priest was in my heart and bubbling up with great joy. And then someone said to me, what are you going to tell your girlfriend in Paris? I said, I'm not going to tell her anything. If I tell her I'm thinking about becoming a priest, she's going to think I'm crazy. If God really wants me to do this for him, then he's going to have her break up with me because I'm too chicken to break up with her. Typical guy. So I made this deal with God. I worked my way back up to Paris, and there's my girlfriend waiting for me. And I ran off the train to go give her a big hug and a kiss, and she said, we have to talk. And she led me to a little cafe, and she sat me down, and she said, you and me, it's finished, it's over with. For you, God's number one in your life, I'm number two. It's finished. And when she said that, honestly, in my heart, I looked up to heaven and I said, I was just kidding, Lord. And then she walked away. Never talked to her again. And through many ups and downs and through many trials and tribulations, I was ordained a priest almost 10 years ago here for the Archdiocese of Chicago. I share this story tonight with you, mainly because this parish is dedicated to our Blessed Mother. And for all the moms and dads and the grandparents that are here, we all know somebody in our family who has lost their way and is looking for the world to fill their hearts that will never satisfy them. They need to have Jesus in their heart. They need to come to our Blessed Mother. I implore all of you to learn about Our Lady's visitation from Medjugorje. It will change your life, and it will change your family's life and those who are lost, the lost sheep. You can bring them back to Jesus. Introduce them to Our Lady of Medjugorje. and watch those miracles begin to happen. My brothers and sisters, I know that our Blessed Mother has her mantle wrapped around this parish, and many graces are in store for this parish if you allow them to happen. Have those devotions to our Blessed Mother blossom within your parish, because through devotion to Mary's most immaculate heart, she will always, always lead you to Jesus. Let's now please stand as we proudly profess our faith.